Well, thank you for coming today. I'm so happy to talk to each one of you. This is great. I see a lot of excited faces. My name is Judy Woo Smart. So I've been here at UNL for about 4 years, but I've been studying bees for almost 12 years, so quite a lot of time. I did not get into bees or grew up thinking I was going to work with bees. When I was your age, I like to be outside. I like to play with the trees and the flowers. I like to climb trees and roll on the grass and do all sorts of fun things like that, but would have never thought that I would be an entomologist or somebody who studies insects. Um, I got into insects just by chance, actually. I was studying in California and looking at sea creatures and sea anemones or animals that didn't do, invertebrate animals, the animals that don't have backbones. Many of them were like sea slugs and sea stars and things like that. But I'm not a good swimmer, so I thought I'd try something different. And that's when I got into insects, and I love being an entomologist, which is a scientist who studies insects. And being an entomologist in the field of bees is exciting because sometimes I get to work with museum folks, and I get to talk to children and talk to adults about the importance of bees, but I also get to go out and play with the bees. So sometimes I put my veil on, I have my smoker, and I go work the honeybees, which there's some right behind us. And then sometimes I get to walk in the field and these different landscapes and use my net to sweep for insects and look to see what types of bees are foraging on which types of flowers, so I can better understand that relationship. There's so much that we still don't understand about certain types of insects, and one of those are the bees. There's so much that we do know, and that there's so much that we don't know. We study honeybees quite extensively, but there's still a lot of different types of wild bees that we don't know very much about at all. So there's a lot that I get to do. Sometimes I'm in my office, which is a little bit boring, and I have to do some computer work. But most of the time, in the summer, I get a lot of opportunities to go out and do some field work. All right, do you guys have any questions? So the way that they make their home is, well, honeybees, for example, make wax. So this is what a wax comb looks like. They'll actually build wax. They'll eat and consume lots and lots of nectar, and that stimulates their wax glands to produce comb. And this comb is what they use to lay eggs in and to hold the nectar and the honey and the pollen. And so a lot of times wild colonies or colonies in the back, they'll produce wax, and that is their housing structure that carries and holds everything. Different wild bees will nest differently. So we have social colonies like that, and they nest in cavities. Bumblebees nest underground. Many wild and solitary bees will nest in stems or blocks, so you don't get to see them as form these big, large colonies like the one behind me. So a colony like this may have about 5,000 bees, but when you're in the hive, they typically are between 30 and 60,000. And then, let's see, do I eat honeycomb? Yes, I do. I love honey from the hive is one of the best things. And now, how do bees make honey? That's a great question. So here's another picture of that comb up close. You can kind of see some liquid inside. That is what the nectar looks like when it's being stored in the comb. And so when the bees get nectar, the house bees will actually put some nectar in their mouth, and then they'll exude a drop out on their tongue. So it's like they're playing with their food. They kind of stick it out of their tongue, and then they suck it back in, and then they'll stick it back out, and then suck it back in. And while they're doing this, they're fanning their wings. And what they're actually doing when they play with their food like that is they are evaporating all the water. So when they're fanning their wings and bringing this nectar out, they're drawing out all the nectar, all the moisture from the nectar, and they're adding a little bee spit. So their enzymes, their salivary enzymes, breaks down some of the sugars. And so that's what honey is. Honey is nectar with all the water removed and a little bit of bee spit added to it. And that's one of the reasons why it never goes bad. And we have light colored honey sometimes, and we have really dark colored honey sometimes. And that all depends on what types of flowers the bees are collecting that nectar from. And they say that the light honey it has lots of nice flavors to it. The dark honey is very strong in flavor, and it has a lot of antioxidants, so it's a lot more healthy for you. But it is a very good natural source of sugar. And that's what the bees use nectar for. Nectar and honey is their source of carbohydrates, so they get a lot of energy. What happens when you guys eat a lot of sugar? You go a little wild, right? You get a lot of energy. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Yes. So the honey and the nectar provide a source of energy for them. They eat it and they have the energy to fly, to forage, to do everything they need. Pollen is different. They collect pollen and then they store it in the comb like this. So you can see that some pollen is yellow, some is orange, some is even dark purple or bluish. And again, the color variation has to do with the type of flowers that they're collecting. But they use pollen as a, yeah, they make pollen, they use pollen as a protein source. So just like we eat chicken or steak or hot dogs or those types of, or tofu, that's how bees get their protein so that they can feed their young and they can grow strong and healthy. How much honey does a bee make each day? Well, they make a lot. Individual bees do different things in the hive, and so not all the bees in the hive are collecting honey. It's only the forager bees that are collecting honey. And you can see, here's a beautiful picture of two colonies that you would see outside. And so one of them is small, it's only 2 boxes. One of them is very large, and you can see that it's got 2 of the brood boxes where their baby bees are, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 smaller boxes. These smaller boxes is where they're collecting all of the honey frames. And if I were to open up the colony, that's what the frames would look like, just individual frames full of honey. And so each one of those boxes are about 50 to 60 pounds. So this colony has 200 pounds of honey that we could take. This one is much smaller and has not made a whole lot of honey at all. So it really depends on the colony's strength and how many bees are in that colony to go out and forage.
When bees make the honey, do they get confused between which one is nectar and which one is pollen?
No, the bees that are foraging, like the honeybees back here, if they're foragers, they're either nectar foraging or pollen foraging. So they grow up to prefer to choose to forage for one or another. Typically, you don't see bees that will forage for nectar and then turn around and forage for pollen. They only forage for one or the other.
How do they make babies?
Oh, good question. How do they make babies? So in honeybees, it's all done by your queen bee. And your queen bee, oh, here's a picture of her. Okay, so she's much bigger. She's got a long abdomen, and she will lay probably anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day. And so that's how the babies are made. She lays the eggs inside the comb, but then the worker bees are the ones that feed the brood, that feed her, feed the young, and then when they go into a cocoon stage or a pupation stage, they have a little cell that is waxed over, and then once they're done metamorphosizing, just like a butterfly turns from a caterpillar to a butterfly, bees will go from a larva into a bee. And I think we have some. Do you guys want to see it? We have some. All right, let's go over. There's one right there. Oh, here, look at that. We've got a camera and everything. There's a bee working her way right now. See her head? That head is kind of coming out and she's moving. That bee is being born right now, essentially. And then the queen was also here. Let's see if we can find the queen. She might be on the other side now.
Why do queen bees fight to be the next queen?
Oh, good question. Why do queen bees fight to be the, well, you know, the way that the honeybees are back there is a very good question. It sounds like you guys already know a little bit about honeybees. There are workers, there are drones, and there are queens. And there's only one queen per colony. And that's because she gives off a lot of her smells, and her smells tell the colony that she's healthy and that she's laying brood and that she is laying eggs to make more babies. And so it really disrupts the colony when there's multiple queens. They don't like that. They will either swarm and the mother queen will leave with the hive, or another possibility is that your queens will fight until one of them dies, and then the other one will take over the hive. And that's just because that's just the way that the natural behaviors of this colony is that they function with one queen, one mother. And those smells are what dictate her productivity. Sometimes we will see two queens in a colony, but usually not very often. It looks like we have another question about, have I done research with drones and bees? And I guess I would have to ask, are you meaning drones like male bees or mechanical drones? Ah, there we go. Mechanical drones and bees. Yeah, so I have not done anything with mechanical drones. But I have worked with drone bees, and drone bees are your male bees. Those are the males. Let me see if I can give you a picture. That's what they look like. Now you can see their eyes meet at the top of their heads, and that's because they mate in air, so they have to have big, big eyes so they can find the queen. And you'll notice they have much rounder abdomen. That's because drone bees don't sting. I know that there are people who are looking into mechanical drones and whether or not you can pollinate with a mechanical drone instead of a bee, but bees are much, much more efficient at pollinating than any machine can be. So here's another picture. This is a worker bee, and you can see what's on her legs right there. That's a big pollen load. And so these bees are furry, and they're very, very good at collecting a lot of pollen. And so when they go from flower to flower to flower, they're able to pollinate lots of different plants. Oh, on this side, I bet you can show them some drones. So this is a nice picture of a, oh, where'd it go? Right there, that big one. See how it's a little bit bigger and round? That one is a drone bee. All of these are workers, and they're all sisters. And you can see kind of underneath these bees is kind of a clear, kind of like this. This is, sure. This right here are the pupating bees. And I'm trying to find your queen here. She was laying an egg, so she might be busy laying. Yeah, the drone is right there. Again, this is a male bee. It doesn't sting. It's pretty much the only thing that it does is mate and then die. If it doesn't mate successfully, they're only around in the summer, and then by fall, the workers will kind of throw them out of the hive. We have some workers that are making wax over here. I don't know where our queen went. All right, Dawes has a question. What would happen to the world if there were no bees? That's a great question. Now, honeybees and wild bees they do make honey. Honeybees make honey, and that's important. But more important is the pollination services that these bees provide. So honeybees and wild bees help pollinate over a third of our diet. So think about all the nutritious types of foods. Who likes to eat apples and blueberries and strawberries? Yes. How about broccoli? How about almonds and nuts? Yeah, so these bees are helping pollinate many of the most nutritious foods that we have. That's our fruits, our vegetables, and our nuts. And so if the bees were all to die, we would have to go and hand pollinate them or use machines to pollinate them, which means the cost of food would probably be much higher for us. Do bees die if they sting? It depends on the bee. Honeybees do die. They only have one chance. They sting, and if they do sting you, they will die because a lot of times the stinger has a poison sac that's attached to them, and so part of their body leaves with the stinger, and it hurts them. So it doesn't hurt them, but it does cause them to die. Other types of bees, like bumblebees, don't lose their stinger, so they can sting you multiple times. And so you can tell that their threshold is much lower, for getting annoyed. I can work with honeybees without annoying them or without causing them to get stung. Bumblebees, I have to be a little bit more careful. Bees can sting other bees. If you have bees that are robbing the hive or intruders that are coming into the hive, that's what they'll do. They'll sting them until they die, or they'll wrap them with propolis and bee glue and keep them stuck, and so they can't cause any problems. What organizations can you donate to help save the bees? Oh, there's a number of things that you can do on the internet. You can look for organizations that help support bees. There's a lot of different types of organizations, but what we like to encourage people to do is think about how you can improve the landscape around you to support bees. You don't need to keep bees to help them. You can plant lots and lots of flowers for them, because they need lots of different flowers that provide nectar and pollen for bees. If we don't do anything to protect your bees, how long will they be here? Oh, that's hard to tell, because bees are quite resilient. There'll be a number of bees that are affected, that there are what we call specialists. Specialist bees are bees that need to go to a certain type of flower or a very they have a close relationship with certain types of plants, which means they have to go to those types of plants to get their food that they need or the nesting material they need. And sometimes they're more vulnerable to changes in the environment or changes to our landscape. Are the queens the most protective of the hive? The queens, actually, their stinger has been modified into an ovipositor, so their stinger really is just used for laying eggs. They can prick you, but they don't really sting. They're defenseless, basically. The workers are the ones that are protecting and guarding both the babies, the resources, and the queen. And then another question we have is there a flower they like best? There's lots of different kinds of flowers that they like. There's a whole list and lots of different lists that are specific to certain areas that kind of show you what types of plants grow well in your area and that provide lots of nectar and pollen for your bees. It's more about the diversity of flowers, more importantly, than one certain plant. Bees can't live well off of one kind of flower, just like we wouldn't do well if we just ate one type of food every day for the rest of our lives. We'd probably get sick. So what bees need are lots and lots of different kinds of flowers that grow in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall. So there's flowers that are blooming at all times of the season. And they do like different color flowers. Some have purple, some are red, some are white. Some have what we call bee guides or nectar guides. Those are little UV type lines that show them where the nectar and the pollen are in the plant. And that sometimes we can't see that with our own eyes, but the bees can. Yes, it says sometimes I get confused with bees and hornets. An easy way to remember is bees are fuzzy and they're vegetarian. So they don't eat meat, they eat protein from pollen. Hornets and wasps, most of them are predatory. They don't have the fuzzy hairs because they don't need to collect pollen. They collect their protein from scavenging different insects and different meats. And so those are predatory insects. So they're not fuzzy and cute like bees are. But even though they sometimes will have yellow and black stripes. And then the last question is that some of these same diseases that affect bees can affect other insects drastically. That's correct. There are pathogens and viruses that are spread from insect to insect and from different communities of insects. And so that's why we also encourage a proper nutrition. A good supportive landscape can help bees fight off a lot of these diseases. And then bees do get, depending on the colony stage, like some of these bees may live 6 to 8 weeks, but in the winter, the same bees have to live 4 to 6 months. And so it really depends on how much fat stores they have saved up and what the seasonality of those bees are. Queens can live 2 to 4 years. Workers, just a few weeks to a few months. Yep. Okay, I think that we have to kind of wrap it up. So thank you so much. And remember, the things that you guys can do to help all bees is to make sure you plant lots of nice flowers. Try to get lots of different types of flowers and different colors and different sizes and different shapes, because that will attract lots of different types of pollinators. And then go out and enjoy. Watch them, see what they do, learn from them. That's what everybody can do, is just learn more about the insects and share your knowledge with other people. So thank you so much. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.